Hello, this is Tanya Garcia, the editor of PR Newser, and I am here with the executive director of Social Media Week, Toby Daniels. Thanks so much for taking some time out.
Sure.
So today we'll start with the question about some of the trends in social media. What are they exactly?
There's just a bewildering array of content and themes and topics that have been focused on. I think some of the things that I am particularly interested in relate to social commerce, so how we shop online and how our sort of shopping experiences can be connected to our social graph. I think also, obviously location is an incredibly hot topic. I mean, location-based services and this sort of whole idea of Foursquare and checking in, has definitely sort of captured the imagination of the early adopters. And to a certain extent represents this like shiny object that everyone wants to sort of like fixate on and obsess about. Definitely location, definitely social commerce, and then I think the third one that I'm definitely personally sort of invested in and fascinated about really relates to what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Egypt right now, and the sort of the uprising and the sort of the role of social media in terms of how individuals in countries that are sort of living in an oppressed environment are turning to technology and turning to social media as a way of getting their voices heard.
Turning back to your first 2 points about location-based applications and social commerce. Now, those two things have indeed been big topics, but it seems like the location-based applications have been a little bit slower to take off, although it is also very popular, whereas social commerce took off rapidly. Bringing those two things together, how exactly is it going to kind of reach out to all audiences? How can people relate to both of those seemingly disparate things?
Well, I think that smartphones are the sort of the connecting piece in all of this, because our smartphones know essentially where we are, and we can opt in to tell our sort of social graph. Specifically the shops, the restaurants, the bars that we are sort of checking into, that we are actually sort of visiting at any given time.
So last week, as I mentioned in the previous segments, I attended the press conference that kicked things off. And my question at the press conference was about how things have changed over the past 3 conferences. You mentioned that it went from kind of the talking about the technology specifically to things that are more industry specific. I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit on that. How did we get from point A to point B?
It's kind of crazy to imagine like how fast things have moved and evolved even just since early 2009, which is just 2 years ago. Well, there have been many sort of like significant events that have taken place since we started Social Media Week. That have many ways sort of almost like defined the conversation. So year one, it was very much about the Obama election and how a nation of young people who are engaged and connected through technology were able to come together and self-organize around the election of a president. And then this time last year, it was just post the Haiti earthquake, and so the conversation was like, well, how do these social technologies then help us in a post-disaster situation, how we collect and disseminate news information? And I think the thing that underpins all of this is the idea that this isn't about, and I hate to use this sort of reference, but it's not about like Twitter and what I had for dinner, which exists, and it exists on sort of one end of the spectrum of how people use social media. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have individual people in who live within an oppressive regime being able to actually do something about it, because they can connect with the rest of the world and to each other and self-organize as a result. And I think that spectrum will always exist, but I think what's happening on this end of the spectrum is definitely far more interesting, and we're just very grateful and fortunate to be able to create a platform for people to be able to sort of come together and talk about this stuff.
Well, and indeed, that is a wide spectrum. So what about the middle, kind of the average social media user? What are they doing when they're online or on their mobile devices?
Well, I mean, I'll reference sort of smartphones in a way as being a kind of a fundamental sort of shift, because not only can we now sort of connect to our social graph, the graph that connects us with everybody that we already know, and not, and now obviously we can map our relationships as a result, but because of smartphones we can do that like all the time. And so the phone is an extension of us, and because of that because we're human beings, and it's just like, it's very natural to us. We want to communicate, we want to feel connected, and we don't have to wait to get back to our PCs or laptops to maintain that connection. Smartphones enable that obviously all of the time, and so that's, I think that's really fascinating to think about, the everyman, the everyday person, and the fact that they are so connected, so much more than they ever have been before, and the fact that it's really infiltrated almost every aspect of their lives.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Again, this has been Toby Daniels, the Executive Director of Social Media Week. Again, thank you so much. And this is Tanya Garcia, the Editor of PR Newser, and this has been Media Beat. Thanks so much for joining us.